Have you ever stopped and wondered what's really going on in your head when you make a decision? Well, in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on some of the hidden psychological forces that are secretly guiding your choices every single day.
So let me just start by asking you this. When you have to make a choice, especially a big one about money, do you think you carefully weigh all the pros and cons? I bet most of us would say, yeah, of course. But what if I told you that some of the most powerful things shaping your decisions are things you don't even realize are happening?
To really get this, we first need to talk about a huge idea that's been around for a long, long time: the myth of the perfectly rational human.
You see, for decades, the world of economics was built on this one core belief, that people are rational creatures. The whole theory was that when we're faced with a choice, we do this sort of cool, logical cost-benefit analysis in our heads. But then, behavioral economists like Dan Ariely came along and started asking a really simple question: is that truly how our brains work?
Okay, so our first big challenge to that old myth comes from a sneaky little mental shortcut, something you could call a hidden anchor. And it was all revealed through a pretty fascinating experiment with some very smart students.
The setup was just so simple but really clever. A bunch of MIT students were asked to write down the last 2 digits of their social security number. So let's say your number was 87. Then they were asked, would you pay $87 for this bottle of wine? Now that's a totally random, arbitrary number, right? It has nothing to do with wine. But after that little mental exercise, they all went into a real auction for that exact same bottle.
And the results? They were absolutely astounding. The students with high social security numbers, the ones from 80 to 99, they bid way, way higher. We're talking in the $20 to $30 range. But the students with the low numbers, from 00 to 19, they bid so much less, only around $8 to $12. That first, totally random number acted like an anchor in their minds, completely warping their idea of what that wine was actually worth.
This whole thing is a cognitive bias called anchoring. It just means that the very first piece of information we get about something tends to get stuck in our heads, and it influences everything that comes after. It's why a car salesman might start with a ridiculously high price. That first number becomes the anchor, and suddenly every other price seems more reasonable in comparison.
All right, next up, let's look at another really interesting split in how we think. It turns out our brains actually play by 2 totally different sets of rules, and it all depends on the situation.
So, on one side, you've got social norms. This is the warm, fuzzy world of community, favors, and friendship. You help a friend move a couch, and you're not going to hand them a bill afterward, right? But on the other side, we have market norms. This is the world of dollars and cents, of wages and prices. Everything is a transaction, and this is where it gets really interesting. What happens when these 2 worlds collide?
Well, an experiment showed this perfectly. One group of people was paid 50 cents to do a task, and they put in pretty low effort. Another group got paid $5, and they worked much harder. Makes sense, right? But here's the kicker. A third group was just given a Snickers bar, a small gift worth about 50 cents. And guess what? They worked just as hard as the $5 group. The gift triggered their social brain. They wanted to be helpful. But that tiny cash payment triggered their market brain, which basically said, not worth my time.
And the takeaway here is huge. If you mention that the candy bar is worth 50 cents, that goodwill, it just shatters. The second market norms, money, enter the picture, social norms can just disappear. It's exactly why you never offer to pay your mother-in-law $20 for cooking a beautiful Thanksgiving dinner. You bring a bottle of wine, a social gift, instead. Okay, let's shift gears to something a little more sensitive. Honesty. I mean, we all like to think of ourselves as good, moral people. But are we, really? Experiments suggest the truth is a little more, shall we say, flexible.
In this one famous experiment, people were paid for every math problem they solved. The control group, who had no way to cheat, they solved about 3 problems on average. But then a second group was told to just shred their answer sheet and tell the researchers how many they got right. Suddenly, their scores magically jumped to 5.5. They had the chance to cheat, and, well, they took it. But here's the part that'll really blow your mind. A third group could also cheat, but before they started, they had to sign a statement acknowledging the MIT honor code. Now, the funny thing is, MIT doesn't actually have an honor code, but it didn't matter. That one tiny moment of moral reflection was enough to completely eliminate the cheating. Their scores dropped right back down to the baseline of 3.
So what are going on here? The researcher Dan Ariely calls it the fudge factor theory. See, most of us don't cheat as much as we possibly could. Instead, we cheat just a little bit, just enough to get a benefit, but not so much that we have to change how we see ourselves. We still want to feel like a good, honest person. So we fudge the truth to get the best of both worlds.
So, we've seen how these anchors, these social rules, and our own personal fudge factor can steer our decisions in some really weird ways. So now, let's tie it all together with one big, powerful idea.
And here it is, the main takeaway from all of this. Our irrationality? It's not some random bug in our mental software. No, it's actually a feature. These behaviors are systematic. They're consistent. And because they're systematic, they are also predictable.
Just think about it for a second. We've seen how anchoring locks in our sense of value. We've seen how that clash between social and market rules totally changes our motivation, and we know that the fudge factor lets us get away with a little dishonesty while still feeling good about it. These aren't just random mistakes we make. They are predictable patterns in human behavior. And that really brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with. If we could understand that these irrational forces exist, and more importantly that they are predictable, that gives us a new kind of power. We can start to spot them in our own lives and maybe even outsmart them. So the question is, knowing all this, what's one decision, big or small, that you might look at a little differently today?